How you doing, Drew?
Oh, Paul, here we are. I am emotionally and physically drained today.
Okay.
It's been a long week.
Everything okay?
It's been a long week.
Been a long week?
Yeah, no, things are good.
Good.
Yeah, no, things are very decent. Things are very decent. How are you?
You know what? I'm not too bad. I hurt my back earlier in the week, so that's been fun. But, I'm old, so it happens.
Tell me what happened.
Well, I was cleaning my oven, and I leaned forward to, get the back little corner, and I heard / felt this snapping, popping noise in my lower back, and it has not been the same since. So
this isn't one of those like cry for helps where like you said you're cleaning your oven, but like Jennifer found you with your head in your oven. And, like,
no, I was cleaning the oven. It's a thing I do from time to time.
Okay, isn't adulting good?
Yeah,
yeah. My body is really starting to shut down on me. There were some really challenging workouts this week, and a lot of them were test workouts. So, like things like CrossFit Total and the workout Jackie. Mm-hmm. And I'm just, man, I've been doing CrossFit for about almost 6 years now, and it's a struggle to maintain. It really is. Like, getting old sucks.
It does.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be one of those, getting old. I don't want to ever be the guy that says getting old sucks, but it's hard to not feel it sometimes.
Yeah, it's a shame when the body just starts doing what it wants and giving out on you. And things you used to do 100 times without even thinking about it suddenly becomes difficult.
So you've been laid up all this week?
I've been surviving, just kind of biting the lip and getting through it. So the only thing I really haven't done is my lawn desperately needs mowed, and I haven't had the heart to do it yet. But yeah, I've just been going throughout my business, getting things done.
Now, when you mow the yard, you push mow? You got a riding mower? What do you got over there?
I have a push mower because my lawn is comically small, and getting a riding mower would be ridiculous.
Now I don't have kids, right? But I'm assuming you could send them out there with some scissors. Worst case, right? Like you can just have them. I've
had Zachary, my son, who's now 13, help me mow a couple of times, and he's a little guy. He's not very tall, so it's kind of hard for him to push the mower, and sometimes it's just not worth the complaining. So maybe when he gets a little bit older, I'll have him do it and just not watch him and just let him take care of it on his own. But I think the wife's going to help me mow it this weekend, so it'll get done.
Good for her.
Yep, she's the best.
Yeah, I mean, having a patient and understanding wife is crucial.
Yep.
As everybody knows. Oh boy. Okay. I got a lot of compliments on the last episode.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people really seem to enjoy that. And I've had more than one person tell me that they can already see how good you're becoming at editing.
I don't edit much, but I'm able to pick out things, and like everything else, it's a skill. You get better at it. Just takes practice, and I'm getting more confident with my tools and knowing what to do. And yeah. I don't think people realize I think we're up to like 8 listeners now. I think people don't realize just how much work you do and how little work I do for this. I honestly enjoy it. I don't mind it. It's kind of my weekend routine now. Hold on. Mm-hmm. I think, hold on, I'm going to get an accurate count here.
Okay. Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, I like numbers.
We're kind of looking at trends here, It looks like we have just shy of 40 regular listeners.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So if you're out there and you're listening and you are you think you are one of those 40 people, first of all, congratulations.
Yep.
You're in on the ground floor of whatever this is.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Wow.
And I appreciate everyone who listens, all the feedback. We keep getting topic suggestions, which I absolutely love. So
Yeah, we'll get to those in a minute.
Yep.
Yeah, man, it's been a long week for me. I'm so like drained by my work is actually starting to kick my ass a little bit. Yeah, I'll get to that at some point.
Okay.
Either on air or off. But yeah, and then, I had a busy week also because I was busy being civic, which I have a topic for that because I've got stuff.
I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, so you wanna jump into some listener feedback here?
Yeah, so I see you've selected a few of our topics, so I'm going to go through them. So this topic comes from a friend of the show, Nick Dunn. We need to come up with a name for our friends of the show.
Oh, that's easy. We call them besties.
Besties. All right, from bestie Nick Dunn. As two individuals who aren't diehard Vim or Emacs fans, I think, I'm interested to hear what you two think about text editors. What do you use? Do you care? What are your thoughts on the endless, pointless bickering between text editor zealots? For those of you who don't know, Vim and Emacs are very popular terminal-based text editors, very keyboard-focused. Yeah, so Drew, how do you feel about text editors?
First of all, Nick, don't write this email as if you're not a text editor zealot. Don't even think for a second. Even think for a second that you're not in that group. First of all, like the way that reads, it's like, oh, those text editor zealots, dude. I've seen your setup. Don't. Okay. So text editors. I guess it depends on what I'm doing. I will say that if I'm in a shell environment, I use Nano. Period. Full stop. Just because, listen, I understand that the Linux elites. I'm talking to you again directly, Nick. I feel like the Linux elites probably look down on text editors inside of Linux like Nano. But you know what? It works, and it's small. It comes, I think, prepackaged with pretty much every Ubuntu installation these days. I'm pretty sure it has a package for almost all Linux distributions. It works. The key commands are simple, especially coming from a non-Linux environment. I mean, listen, when I got to college and we had Unix and VAX and all these other systems that we had to log into to get our email because there weren't Windows email clients at the University of Pittsburgh when I was there. I get it, right? I had to use Linux text or shell-based editors like Vim and Emacs, and I get it. Vim, how to quit Vim, right? I get it. That's what one of those kids call memes, right?
Yeah,
it sucks, but yeah, I get it. Vim's installed by default on everything everywhere, but there's just better. You don't have to suffer the indignity of knowing when to hit escape and when to hit a colon inside of Vim. I get it. So if I'm in a shell, I'm probably using Nano. It's there, right? It's just there. Do you disagree, Paul? You use a Mac, so I know you spend a lot of time in terminal. So
yeah. Honestly, I do the same thing. If I have to edit a file on a Unix system, I also use Nano. Every 4 or 5 years, I play around with the idea of I'm going to learn Vim, and I know the basic commands, but it just breaks my brain. I've watched people who are really good at Vim, just fly through things, but my head just cannot get around that way of thought. So I'm a Nano guy. I respect people who can use Vim or Emacs, though I really don't know how Emacs works. I've never really used it. I respect them. They're definitely more hardcore than me, but I just can't do it. And also me personally, I'm a GUI kind of guy. So if I'm on my Mac, my text editor of choice that's UI based is an application called BBEdit. I remember using it old Mac classic, System 7, System 8, and it's always been there. They keep updating it. It just works. And also a shout out, if I'm going to do Markdown, which I love Markdown, my favorite app on the Mac and iOS is a tool called IA Writer. I like it a lot just for editing Markdown files. It's good. So what do you use outside of a terminal, Drew?
Yeah, all of those editors are really, really good. I have used BBEdit. IA Writer isn't one I'm too familiar with. if I'm on a PC and if I'm working inside the Mac, kind of GUI, I find more and more these days I just use VS Code. Right?
Okay.
There's plugins for pretty much every language. It works. It's fine. I also am a big fan of Notepad++. I've been using Notepad++ for a lot of years. Again, kind of license royalty-free type stuff. There was a point in time where I used Eclipse for a lot of things, and I'm glad I don't need to do that anymore. But yeah, I use Notepad++ and VS Code a lot. I do want to give a shout out to a very interesting Mac utility that I don't have a use for so much anymore. But if I was working more collaboratively with people every day that I saw, shout out to Sub-Atha Edit. Have you used that?
No, I've never even heard of it.
Okay, you're going to want to check this out. So Sub-Atha Edit is a Mac application that basically enables collaborative editing, kind of like what you get with Google Docs, except at the app level.
Ooh.
So you can basically share a doc that multiple people can work on from their Sub-Atha Edit consoles together. So if you have like shared meeting notes, or you guys are hacking code together, or things like that, Sub-Atha Edit is a pretty cool program. It's also a pretty decent-ish text editor as well.
Wow.
So I would
cool.
definitely check that out.
Yeah.
Sub-Atha Edit is a pretty good one too.
That's going in the queue. All right. I think it's all we have to say about text editors.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like just use what you want.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Vim, Emacs, Nano, just I don't know, writing ones and zeros to a buffer. Like, who cares?
Well, here's the interesting thing, right? So the reason that people feel like they have to learn Vim is that if you've ever installed Git, like Git SCM on your Windows terminal or Windows computer, Windows VM, whatever, the default editor that ships for that when you're checking in commit comments or merge comments is Vim. So there's a built-in Vim editor that comes with Git on Windows. So unless you tell that to use something else, you're going to have to exit Vim at some point. So
right.
Like, just it's fine. The keystrokes are arcane. If you don't use it every day, you'll forget them. Like, theres times where like I'm trying to remember how to delete a line and I can't remember, right? All I know is like escape gets you back to the command line, and then colon Q or colon WQ, depending on if I want to save my work or not, right? Like, that's all you really need to know. At the end of the day, just use what you want. Like, it's fine. I think we can all agree, though, that Emacs sucks. Sorry, Nick.
Honestly, like, that's one of the first things I do in a new machine is, git config. What is it? Git config core editor nano, and then I'm done.
Yeah,
because I don't want to. My Vim breaks my brain. It just does.
Yeah, it's a text editor that you can't really edit text with unless you do keystrokes ahead of time.
Yeah, and I do want to shout out, what is it called? There's a website called Vim Adventures. We'll put a link in the show notes. And when this came out, I was like, yes, I'm finally going to learn Vim. It's kind of a little game that you play when you're trying to learn Vim, and I was real excited about it. It's real cute. It's got kind of pixel art. No, it's still like, no. It just, my brain, it doesn't stick.
Yeah, I remember Vim Adventures. I haven't looked at it in a while, though. I got to get back to that. That was a good site.
Yeah. I don't. They probably ask for money now. I don't know. I know. It looks like it's still free. Yeah. All right. So we have another topic suggestion from the same bestie, Nick Dunn. He says, you guys talked a bit about board games, but what about tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer 40K, Gloomhaven, Star Wars Armada, X-Wing, etc.? What are your thoughts and experiences on the ones you have experience with?
Well, Mr. GM/DM, why don't you kick us off here?
So I'll do the first one first. Dungeons and Dragons, tabletop role-playing games in general. I've been playing tabletop games on and off since I've been 13 years old, maybe even 12. I grew up playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of the White Wolf, Worlds of Darkness games, Shadowrun, and various things on and off. It really wasn't until I got to college where we actually had a campaign that lasted more than 4 months. I personally enjoy playing role-playing games. I've started to get back into it as an adult, on and off. I enjoy running tabletop role-playing games, being the game master, dungeon master. I enjoy that medium for telling stories. It really makes me happy to have an idea and sit down with a bunch of people and kind of explore my ideas and my stories together and kind of build a story together. So that's me in role-playing games. How about you, Drew?
Yeah, I want to call myself a little bit of a late bloomer getting into tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowruns and things like that, because when I was in high school, there were two other guys that I knew that played D&D, and they invited me to one of their games. I'm pretty sure it was 2nd edition, and I just remember it was the first time I had read about Dungeons and Dragons. I had read stuff on the internet about groups that played, and it just wasn't a thing that really took off at my high school when I was there. But when I did get to play, it was 2nd edition D&D, and calculating things like armor class and 100-side die. It just broke my little teenage brain a little bit, because I wanted. Up to that point, I'd only really played video games, and I was definitely a min-maxer, so it was all about the numbers.
Right.
And I have over the years kind of changed my thinking there a little bit, where my goal isn't to make a powerful character, it's to make an interesting character. So I like kind of putting some thought and care into my backstory and selecting weird skills, and just you never know when they're going to pan out, right? Because I have found, and speaking as somebody who has also been a GM, if you take like art as a skill, you better you're going to be damn sure you're going to make an art check at some point in my campaign.
Yep.
Like, I will make you roll those dice. I value interesting characters versus just combat heavy, magic heavy, charisma heavy characters.
Yep.
So I like things like that.
Yeah, I'm the same way. For me, it's about the actual role playing and pretending you're somebody else, and that the shared story and the flexibility of it. Like, it's less about, well, my strength is 2 points higher than yours, and I have a +3 vorpal sword, so I should be, no. Like, the numbers are there to assist and, add a little bit of luck and excitement to the game. But for me, it's about, it's about the story. It's about role playing.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And, and then in college, while I did play some board games, I never really got a chance to play any tabletop games. It wasn't until I got out of school and moved to Columbus that I hooked up with some people at my very first job here that had kind of a bi-weekly game group, and we played a lot of different games. When I first joined them to play a game, we were actually playing the Star Wars D&D type game, Star Wars adventure game, back, I even forget what edition it was, and I joined that campaign kind of halfway through, and kind of created a character and got some free levels out of it. And, getting to know a group of people that you see every other week is a great way to make friends, especially when you're new in town and someone takes a flyer on you. Is that, that guy doesn't look too weird. Maybe you can play D&D with us. Yep. That's just a good time. And then, I played games with that group pretty much every other week for, I want to say 8 years. And in that time we kind of vacillated a lot. We would go between Star Wars, we would go between Shadowrun, between regular D&D back when it was 3rd edition, and then, we would kind of go back to Star Wars for a while, and then we would go to D&D 4th edition, or we go to Shadowrun 5th edition. Like, we kind of grew up with some of those, editions of those games. And I got to GM a couple of them. I know that I GM'd a game that you were a part of. I've been in games that you've GM'd. So yeah, no, it's I really enjoy a good tabletop RPG, and I know that one of these days we have a kind of a sideline topic about Shadowrun 6th edition that we will get to at some point.
Yep, the beginner box set has just released, so I'll be getting my hands on that soon. And
really?
So it's not the full rules; it's just kind of like a introduction, a handful of rules, some pre-made characters, and an adventure. But mine's on a truck coming from California. So when I get my hands on that, we'll give it a try.
So the actual rules aren't due until August?
August, but if you go to Gen Con, I believe you can get your hands on a copy earlier. which I won't be there. But just anybody who's out there who's ever really thought about the kind of interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons, it's really got a resurgence. The 5th edition has just come out. The rules are much more approachable. Wizards of the Coast has really knocked it out of the park with this one. And if you're curious, I would really recommend... right now it's only in Target, but they just released a new box set called the D&D Essentials Kit. And it comes with... again, much like the Shadowrun Beginner's Box, it comes with just enough rules to get you started, some pre-made characters, a sample adventure, and I've heard really lots of good reviews about it. So it's a good way to kind of get your dip your toe into it.
Huh? I mean, imagine if you could go back in time and tell younger Paul that you would be buying D&D adventures at a major retail chain.
Yeah,
Target.
Yeah, it's an exclusive at Target, I think, until September. And apparently it's been hard to get some places because the demand's been higher than they expected. So, yeah, who would have thought?
Well, it's so, D&D is so, I hate to use the word, but kind of mainstream at this point, right?
It is, yeah. It's
a lot of people play it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, oh boy, I'm going to get in trouble for this. There was a time where if you like Star Wars... or if you like D&D, that was bona fide nerd credentials. But if you want to really stand out in a nerd crowd these days, you're going to need more than that. Just because those, who do you meet that isn't a Star Wars fan, quote unquote? I understand that's, everybody loves Star Wars, right? But D&D is kind of the same thing at this point, and that's not a bad thing, right? I love Star Wars, I love D&D, right?
Yeah,
but they're kind of mainstream, right? If you here we go. If you really want to go down the rabbit hole here, right? Branch out from D&D. I understand the high fantasy setting is kind of a really good place to start, but man, I'll tell you, some of the best adventures I've ever played have been in either Shadowrun or D20 Modern, which I think D20 Modern is dead at this point, but
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, D20 Modern was really fun because that was a modern role-playing game, right? You could basically base your campaign in your city with real places. And there were rules for, general things that occurred every day, right? And I know that sounds boring because you live in everyday life, but trust me, there's something there.
Yeah.
But things like Cyberpunk, I never got into Cyberpunk. I bought a rule book once, but no one really wanted to play it.
They're coming out with the new edition of Cyberpunk. It's going to come out I think a few months before the new video game.
Oh man, I'm so excited. I always wanted to try that. I never got into Vampire.
Yeah. I've played Vampire, Werewolf, Mage, Changeling.
Never played Mage.
Yeah.
Again, I had bought books for Mage. I had bought books for Werewolf. I didn't buy one for Vampire. I had a book for Cyberpunk, but I never played them. And there's another one I'm saving for the kind of part 2 of this discussion, but I never played any of those games. And Vampire always fascinated me because when I used to work late in college, I would walk home very late at night, and the Vampire people would be out playing.
Oh, the LARPers.
Yeah, well, yeah. It wasn't necessarily LARPing, right? There wasn't any quote unquote combat going on that I could tell. But they were just all, dressed very darkly in an urban campus, which I think is unsafe in principle.
Yep.
But they would all kind of hang out on the Cathedral of Learning lawn and play Vampire once a month, I believe, was when that group met up. I joined the mailing list. That's as far as I got. Don't at me. I didn't play Vampire in college.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly did. Yeah, I played a lot of those. Again, for me, the one game that's always really captured my heart, warts and all, and we'll talk about this in a future episode, is Shadowrun. Something about that setting just lights me up.
Yeah, no, I am definitely a Shadowrun fan. I think that's probably my all-time favorite kind of tabletop adventure type game. Just because there's so much there.
Yep.
If you go back to Shadowrun 3rd edition, I forget how many books there were, but man, there were so many source books for Shadowrun 3rd edition, and I think I had at one point most of them. Between me and my friends, I think we almost had every 3rd edition source book.
I had every 2nd edition, every 3rd edition. I skipped kind of some the anniversary edition. I almost had all of. I skipped 4th completely. I think I had all of the 5th up to a point, and Yeah, I'll be getting the 6th edition, and spoiler alert, I'm probably going to start a campaign when 6th edition comes out, so be ready for that.
Yeah, you can definitely count me in for that.
Woo!
I'll probably host it at my place, just so you know.
Spectacular. So what about like tabletop miniature games? Obviously the big one, the big gorilla is Warhammer. Ever play any of those?
So no. So Warhammer is not anything that I ever got into, and it's not for lack of trying. It's just that anytime I had ever seen a group of people play Warhammer, I was really taken aback by the intricacy of the models. So, okay, step back. So we're talking about Warhammer 40K, right?
That's the one I have the most experience with. Yes.
Okay.
And now it's something else now. I don't know, all news editions, but I'm always thinking about 40K. Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand that Warhammer itself is a high fantasy setting, and then Warhammer 40K is just 40,000 years
in the future. Yeah.
From there, or from now. It depends on how you interpret it. But Warhammer 40K, I was always struck by the intricacy of the models. You have a fantasy setting where you have, sci-fi fantasy setting where you have tanks and flying jets and, troops and swords and guns that have swords and swords that have guns.
And buckets of terrain. You're building these intricate maps with like burnout houses and trees and
you got... You think of the craziest combinations of weapons that could ever exist, and they probably exist in the 40K universe. You've got hammers that are powered by plasma, and you've got like pistols that do insane amount of damage and can kill tanks. Like it's a crazy setting, and Warhammer 40K is unique in that it isn't like you roll some dice and move some things around a grid, right? There's very intricate rules around how far a unit can move.
Break out the tape measures.
Literally little tape measures for what they can move, what their fields of fire are, how suppressed they are, how open they are, what your chance to hit them are. If you've ever played the video game XCOM, okay, either one of the originals or one of the newer ones, like that takes place roughly on a grid. There is no grid, right?
Right.
It's a giant open map that somebody has taken the time to build in their basement or at a hobby shop or both, and you have these grand scale battles, right? And I have watched people play Warhammer 40K, and near as I can tell, in order to show up and play a game of Warhammer 40K, you basically need three things. One, some way to transport all your intricately crafted, painted things, right? Which vary in size and shape, so there's not like there's some universal container that can carry all these things. I don't know how people did it before, bespoke organizers for these things, right? I'm sure you have stories, and I'd love to hear some. But you have to bring all those, and then you have to bring your binders full of rules for just your units, right? Because every unit has a different set of rules about how they move and what they do. You have to bring your tape measures. You have to bring your pen and pencil, probably a calculator or a computer at this point.
Before that, one of the most important things you have to do is these miniatures do not come assembled, and they do not come painted. So you have to get out your X-Acto knife, your glue, and your paints, and painstakingly spend hours painting these miniatures.
And as far as a barrier to entry go, right? Like I could figure out the logistical piece of how I would get to and from a game. I could handle the learning of the rules. However, I'm not a super artistic person in that I think that I could correctly assemble and paint all of the miniatures. And I'm going to add a big qualifier here, to my satisfaction. Yes, I could paint them, but I would probably end up unhappy with how they would look. And that is applied to any time I have purchased a custom miniature for D&D or Shadowrun or what have you. I will absolutely go through the process of painting it, but I almost universally hate the way it turns out. Everybody will tell me, oh, it looks good. And then I'm like, no, it doesn't. It looks like shit. I end up unhappy with it. And we should also point out that if you don't paint your miniatures in Warhammer 40K, aren't there penalties?
Well, so I don't think there are, but my experience with 40K is when I went to college, one of my first college roommates was big into 40K, and all of his friends were. And there's also the kind of the people that I started playing like tabletop RPGs with. So like 40K was just something I had to, like, I was exposed to. I played a few games using other people's miniatures. I started building my own army, but I quickly realized that I didn't have the money for it. It's a very expensive hobby. And B, I did not have the patience or the skills to paint these things with any kind of like detail, or they didn't look good. They were bad. And the group that they played with were hardcore. Like, if you didn't have painted miniatures, it was like a -2 dice penalty. If you had less than 4 colors on your miniature, it was a -1 penalty. And like, they even got down to the fact, like, well, you said your guy has a grenade. I don't see a grenade on his belt, therefore he doesn't have a grenade. Like, they were full on neck beard, like min-max, like totally into the hobby. But these guys, these are the guys, like, if you ever been into a game store and you see the table of guys just like, they would go to the game store and just paint for like 8 hours and love every second of it. They would even play the game. They would just talk about the game, like just talk about strategies and what's new coming out and what they bought and combinations they thought while they were painting, and they loved it. And I couldn't do it.
Yeah, and you know, like, the assembling and the painting of the miniatures is definitely probably the biggest barrier entry to me. But also, we should mention the cost, right? Because you don't show up to a Warhammer 40K game with, you know, 5 or 6 different things. You have to field an army, like a literal army of miniatures of all different shapes, of all different sizes. Like, yeah, maybe you can go buy a set of, you know, Chaos Marines for, you know, $30 or $40 and assemble them and paint them. But if you want the Chaos Marines flying tank, well, that's $80 unassembled, unpainted for the kit, right? If you break it, if you cut out the wrong thing, I mean, what are you going to do, right? Like, it's a very, very expensive hobby that, if you were going to just jump in and start playing, would be very, very difficult. Like, and again, I have seen people play rules where, like, if you show up with unpainted miniatures, like, you're at a -1 for the entire thing. Yep. But if you, like, actually paint the miniatures the colors they're supposed to be, like, if you are playing, like, you know, Chaos Marines and you point them, like, you know, a certain color, blood red, because, you know, blood for the blood god and all that. You get bonuses, you know, applied because you are true to the setting. I mean, I get all that, right? I've never heard the grenade in your hand on your miniature type thing, but I wouldn't put it past certain nerds to do that.
They were hardcore.
Yeah. So 40K, there's a lot of barriers to entry there for me. Now, having said that, right, I'm going to call that kind of the granddaddy of a lot of these war games. I mean, I know that there have been other tabletop war games of, you know, World War II setting, World War I setting. There's been other kind of tabletop games there, but I think the thing that brought most tabletop gaming into my life have been games like, you know, X-Wing and Armada, right? So Star Wars X-Wing and Armada is a tabletop space combat game at either the kind of high action, fast paced, fighter based space combat of things like X-Wings and TIE fighters, and then you have the more tactical fleet combat in Armada. Again, it's got a pretty high barrier to entry because you have to buy, a few things.
As someone who has an extensive Armada collection, it can be very expensive. Yeah,
and it's not something you can play relatively quickly either, right?
No.
You gotta get your fleet, or most of your fleet, to where you're going to play. You have to probably, hopefully ahead of time, built your fleet and have allocated, you know, the requisite number of points that make up your fleet. So your cards and your ships and your abilities, and you know what's going to happen. It takes place over a series of turns that kind of go back and forth, I think. I haven't played in a while. But yeah, you have these giant combats and you roll dice and you mash against each other.
Yeah, so X-Wing is a lot faster. It's smaller. Like, it's obviously it's smaller scale. On the occasions where I get to play Star Wars Armada, which is like big capital ships like Star Destroyers and MC-80s and all the big ships. You know, I'll sit down to play with bestie Nick Dunn, actually, and you know, by the time we get set up and finish a game, you know, it's probably like 4 hours, And the people playing X-Wing there, they've played like 4 or 5 games in that time. We're like, yeah, you finished your game. We're on turn 2. Yeah, so they're different. But I like these games because the models look great. They're pre-painted, fully licensed. They look great. They feel great. They have good build quality. And I don't have to assemble anything. I don't have to paint. Now, I have spent a lot of time and thought on storage and transportation, but that's a me problem. Yeah, so I really enjoy those games. I wish I had more time to play them. But.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat there. Matter of fact, I think I've sold all my X-Wing and Armada stuff to either you or Bestie Nick Dunn.
I bought all your Armada stuff. That's how I got started. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like Bestie Nick Dunn bought most or not all of my X-Wing stuff. I can't remember. But and again, there's a lot of advantages here, right? Like, yes, the barrier to entry based on price is still there, but the time and effort, to energy to paint and kind of customize these things isn't there because, like you said, they come pre-painted, they come almost fully pre-assembled. I mean, is the detail as high on them as something you're going to find in a custom painted Warhammer miniature? No, but it's good enough, right?
Yeah.
You can clearly tell that this looks like a Star Destroyer. Or this looks like an X-Wing. Yeah, exactly. They look nice. It's perfectly fine.
Yep. I've already pre-ordered the Super Star Destroyer. That should be coming later this year. I'm excited for that.
Yeah. I haven't played that game in a very long time, and when I did play it, I did enjoy it. It's just it's a function of time versus effort, and I've never been a big tactical thinker in games like that where multiple things are moving and you're kind of focused on one opponent solely. That isn't necessarily my jam, but yeah, it's a good game. I enjoyed it when I played it. The last one I want to talk about here, and it's one I never got into but always wanted to, was BattleTech.
Oh, yeah. So I played the heck out of BattleTech when I was in high school. The group of kids that I played tabletop RPGs with, the house we went to, he was my best friend at the time. Loved BattleTech. He had lots of miniatures. He would, I'm sure they were lead, back in the day. And not only did we play lots of BattleTech, we also played the Mech Warrior RPG that went along with it. Yeah, we played a lot of BattleTech. Yeah, and BattleTech was they kind of took the idea from Robotech. They're just big to robots with dudes inside them fighting. Yeah, and that's went on to to create the Mech Warrior computer game series as well.
Yeah, so BattleTech definitely ticks a lot of my boxes, right? So it's very futuristic. There's considerable lore in BattleTech.
Yeah, I never got too much into the lore inside of I knew the clans versus the inner sphere.
Oh my goodness! All of the what are they, the Fukita whatever drives or whatever that made interstellar travel possible, all the way up to all the different inner sphere wars and love triangles and clan invasion and no, there's a lot to sink your teeth to in BattleTech. And the cool thing about BattleTech is it kind of takes the tabletop. You field a giant team of big stompy robots, right? And again, it's all done to scale. It's not like you have big stompy robots that are bigger than the terrain or anything. Everything's to scale on the map that you play on and everything. There's a ton of different different chassis, light, medium, heavy, super heavy, that are totally configurable with different weapons, and you have to manage heat and damage, and you can, crit someone in their reactor for one shot and flip a table over. And yeah, there's a lot to love there about BattleTech. And the other thing that it has is there is a whole separate role-playing aspect to BattleTech as well.
Yeah, the Mech Warrior.
Yeah, so you can have a campaign where you do the big stompy robot action on the battlefield with your BattleTech mechs, and then have a whole side campaign where you do a bunch of role-playing things in the time period that you're playing in, right?
Yep.
So it's got it's got a lot of everything. The sad tragedy for me is that I could never find anybody who would want to play it. The closest I ever got, because I so desperately wanted to play it, is back in the 90s. They had a BattleTech trading card game.
I remember that.
I remember that was the first booster box of trading card game cards that I ever bought. I never bought a box of Magic. I never bought a box of Star Wars. I never bought a box of any of those other collectible card games, but I did buy a box of BattleTech. I had every single card. I don't know where they got to. I was the only one that ever wanted to play it. I had all the cards. I had all the good cards. It was a pretty unbalanced game, if I'm honest. And yeah, BattleTech for me was a game that I always wanted to play and never got a chance to. And again, like, there are games out there today that are in that universe, right? So you've got games like computer games like MechWarrior Online, and there's a BattleTech video game out on Steam as well that's really good. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff there, and it's a lot of fun. And there's so many like giant mech games that have come out of, not the BattleTech universe, but the BattleTech paradigm, right? And again, I just wish it was a game I had a chance to play.
Yeah, it's making a bit of a resurgence too. Catalyst Game Labs, the company that ended up with that license. Oddly enough, originally BattleTech was done by the same company that did Shadowrun, the great FASA Corporation.
Yep.
And Catalyst Game Labs keeps pushing out more and more content around BattleTech, so it must be selling because they keep making more books.
Yep. Yeah, I mean it's there. But even in this times of resurgence for tabletop and wargaming type things, I just don't see people playing BattleTech. There were a group of guys that I did see at my local game store that were playing it off and on, but it was just the two of them. And Lord knows what happened to those two. But I would love the chance to play some BattleTech. If I was gonna pick up a tabletop game to play right now, I would probably pick up BattleTech. But that's just me.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow. That's a good one.
Yeah. Woo.
All right. So, Bestie Nick Dunn. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yep.
We're already 43 minutes into the show. We're still in Bestie follow up. Let's do one more, and then we'll get to some regular topics.
Okay.
It's gonna be a long one tonight, Paul.
Yeah. Okay. So our last topic suggestion in the board game vein comes from Bestie Eugene. Oh, I'm gonna butcher this last name. I apologize in advance.
Just say Eugene or Gene.
Bestie Eugene.
I know him.
Bestie. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Are there types of genres of board games you simply will not play no matter what?
Well, the short answer to that question is no. Because if I'm invited to a game night and somebody wants to play a game that I might not, a game or genre game that I don't necessarily like, I will still absolutely play it because I'm there to be social, right? They invited me to their homes or their game nights. I'm going to play whatever game they're going to play. Now, having said that, are there definitely games that I don't like? Absolutely. As I don't know if you could call this a genre of game, but I don't necessarily like games with a lot of direct player conflict. Good examples of this would be games like Blood Rage, where you're constantly just stomping on people. Because a lot of times you will be playing that with more than two people, and invariably somebody is going to get stomped on just a little too hard, and it can be hard to come back. Even though more modern games are finding ways to balance that, I don't necessarily like that, especially when there's things like dice involved. I mean, maybe Blood Rage is a little bit bad example because you're just adding numbers together,
right?
But games where you're throwing large units at individual players and rolling dice to determine the outcome, I don't necessarily like. There's some exceptions to that rule. I think Twilight Imperium, regardless of the edition you're playing, I mean, that defines a lot of that game. But, a lot of times the people who win aren't necessarily the people who get in fights in that game. So if you can avoid combating games like that, you usually win. And of course you could totally steamroll some people too. So as I don't know if you can call this so much a genre, but I don't necessarily dig games like that. I don't know.
Yeah, like I'm there's not a genre that I would avoid. Again, if I'm being invited to a game night, I'm just happy to be there. I'm going to play whatever. I'm not a fan of the modern mainstream party game like apples to apples, and all of the games that aren't apples to apples but basically are, those just don't do it for me. I'm also not the biggest fan of skill games where you have to like flick or actually like do something like mechanically. What's that? Games like Flick 'em Up, and what's that really popular one that you're like in the dungeon?
Catacombs.
Catacombs. Like those games, like they're fine. They just don't do it for me. I don't mind the games like that have direct confrontation. Though sometimes you just have to know that sometimes you're going to be the person that gets picked on, and meh. Yeah, but really, end of the day, if someone says, "Hey, Paul, you want to play a game?" Yes, I'm down. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat there. And in games where the possibility exists to get stomped on, if I'm playing with a group of people that I either know don't react well to that, or if they're people that have never played the game before, I will oftentimes kind of make myself the target so they don't have to suffer that, because it can be pretty rough. Now, that's not to say that I don't like competitive games. I do. I thrive, to kind of turn this topic around a little bit, I thrive in games that require a little bit of shrewdness. Mm-hmm. You know, games like Power Grid, where, you know, you're not directly confronting a player, but if you can cut off their building pattern, or if you can shark a power plant from them that they really need, or play the resource market that they end up paying more money and costing them the game, like those are the types of games that I like being shrewd and competitive in.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, Gene, I hope that kind of answers your question. I guess there aren't really games that I won't play. And I'm with you, Paul. Like, if I'm going to go to a game night and I show up and the only thing they have is Munchkin or Apples to Apples, I'm probably going to be disappointed, but I'll tough it out.
If that's why you have a couple of, you know, good games in your trunk, like, hey, if you like this, I have a game like Decrypto, or
there's so many good games out now. Many good games out.
There is. It's a wonderful time to be alive.
Yeah. Whew, man, that was a good deal of follow-up, and we got some mileage out of that.
Yeah. Thanks to everybody who sent in topics. Keep them coming. We love it.
Yeah, no, totally. Paul, so to take us to the next stage of this podcast here, a while back, you had put on this particular document, The topic you put in the document was dealing with the government and my personal info. Subtext, getting a P.O. box. Because, boy, do I have some things to tack on the end of this one.
Okay, I thought that you added that. I don't think that was me.
Oh, well, maybe this goes back to the thing that I wanted to originally talk about.
I think this was you. Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you that don't keep up with me on a daily basis, I mean, you know, what's wrong with you? I had a very civic week this week. I had to report for jury duty.
You know what? That is something I've never had to do.
Oh boy, Paul, let me tell you all about it. So, if there's one thing that I've kind of learned this week, it's that I have no idea how our justice system works. No, that's not necessarily true. It's just that I had to report for jury duty at the Franklin County Common Pleas Court. And I understand that there are a lot of different courts that you can be a jury on. So I'm going to speak from the experience of what I went through of a week almost of jury duty at the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas. So a few months ago, I got a summons in the mail saying, you know, hey, dummy, you've got jury duty this week. And what you have to do is when you get your summons, there is a link that you have to go to. You have to enter your juror ID and some other personal identifiable information that takes you to a survey link where you fill out your contact info, answer some basic questions about your background and about any kind of accessibilities or handicap issues you may have. And then you basically have to show up the first Monday of your week of jury duty a little bit early for orientation. Now, I had to defer for the first dates that I had my jury duty because I was in the middle of a job change / big project on my way out the door at my last job. So I just felt it prudent with everything I had going on that I was going to push that. You are allowed to defer once in this court system. So I did that. So I was definitely on the hook for this one. So this was my week to report. So I'm going to tell you about my jury duty experience and why this ranks right up there with any time I've ever had to go to the driver's license bureau or the post office.
I can't wait.
Because here's the thing, right, is that all of these things have one thing in common, and it's dealing with the government and the bureaucracy, right? So things have to be at the absolute lowest common denominator when you're dealing with situations like this. Now, let me give you an example. In your jury duty summons, there is a barcode. Okay, and it very specifically says in big bold letters, hey, when you show up for jury duty, bring your summons, because as somebody who has worked with computers for most of his life, barcodes on things usually mean that you're going to scan them someplace. Usually. So I show up for orientation on Monday. So I had to be there 8 a.m. Now, the interesting thing here is that if you don't live in Columbus, Ohio is actually a pretty big town.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to call it a city. Columbus is actually a pretty big city, right? And if you ever go downtown, one thing that is really, really hard to do in Columbus on the weekday is park, and park affordably.
Yeah.
There are a lot of surface lots, but a lot of the surface lots are reserved for the buildings that they're right next to. And matter of fact, this particular area where the courthouse is, the surface lots, at least 2 of them, are reserved only for medical buildings in the same general vicinity. There are a lot of parking garages around here. Now, in any other time that I have to go downtown to Columbus, I always allow myself extra time to park. Because even though that there may be a parking garage near where I'm trying to go, that garage will probably be full. If you're not one of the first people there, you're kind of out of luck. So if you try to head downtown at any point after 8 a.m. on a weekday, you're probably not going to be able to get into the garage you need to get into. Now, the silver lining here is that for Common Pleas Court, there is a garage with a certain number of spaces that are dedicated and held for jury duty.
Oh.
So, but the catch here is you have to get there before anybody else does. So,
got it.
So I had to be there for 8 a.m. orientation on Monday. So I left the house at about 7:15. I parked in that garage at 7:55 only because Columbus is laid out in such a way, and it's like this in all major cities. This isn't a knock against Columbus, but there's a lot of roads that are one way. So even though the GPS and the map shows you that the garage is right off the freeway, you have to go around a certain number of blocks. And it's the summer in Ohio, which means there's a lot of, construction work and a lot of road work and a lot of projects going on downtown right now. So a lot of roads are either completely closed or the lane that would take me in the direction of the garage I'm trying to get to is closed. So there was a very roundabout way that, long story short, I ended up sweating bullets so I was going to be able to get into this garage. I did get into this garage, but I was almost late for orientation in the process. So you get in line. So you go to the courthouse. You have to pass through security. Now, in the helpful instructions for jury duty, it in no uncertain terms says, hey, don't bring your phone. Okay? Because, yes, you can use your phone in the courthouse, but if you get sent to a trial, you have to turn it off.
Right.
And for orientation, you also have to turn it off. So for the first day, I did bring my personal phone. I did not bring my work phone in, but I brought my personal phone in just because I wanted something to do while I waited in line for orientation, because they basically break you into 2 lines. And they say that the doors were going to open at 8 a.m., which in government terms means not a minute before 8, right?
Right.
Like those doors are gonna open at 8, even though the line is already formed and they could be getting these people in. That door's not gonna open until 8 a.m. And sure enough, 8 a.m. on the dot, those doors open and they start checking people in. Now, before I go any further, it's important that I point out that the people on the jury commission are super helpful and super nice. And given what they have to deal with, I don't know how they do it, right? Because you have so many people that just do not want to be there. I encountered complainer guy who was in line next to me, who was adamant that he could not be there, as if I could do something about it. So for the whole time I was in line, this guy was just talking about his bad foot and what he couldn't do and why he thinks that he shouldn't be here. And, at one point, kind of giving in and crumbling a little bit, I said, there's some reasons why you can't serve. Did you look at any of those? And he gave me this bewildered look like, well, of course I looked at those reasons. They don't apply to me. Well, then I go, I guess you're kind of stuck then.
Right.
And I did everything I could to kind of get away from him, but he found me again in the jury commission room. It was, oof, right? Like there's a lot of people who do not want to serve on jury duty. Now, I don't want to consider myself one of those people. This was my first time serving on jury duty, and you know what? I felt a certain bit of civic pride being asked to do jury duty. I did.
Right. Okay, makes sense.
I had never done it before, so this was all new to me. I was hoping to get seated on a trial. I wanted to see the process of justice. I wanted to actually see a judge in a black robe and do all that. Like, I wanted to be immersed in this, right? Because this is something you read about or you hear other people talk about. I was ready to do the thing. Okay, so you get to orientation. The jury commissioner lady says hello. She talks to us. She talks to us about what orientation is going to be, and then we all have to check in. So here's gateway to entry number one. Here is that you have to take your little barcode. Now, this is both an observation on the bureaucracy of government and also how people can't be trusted to help themselves. So the way you check in the jury duty is the two lines kind of funnel into the jury commission lobby, which is just basically like a giant hospital waiting room.
Okay.
There's actually pretty comfortable chairs. There's some tables. There's a designated quiet room. There's some rooms where if you need to go take a phone call, you can. But the general idea is that once you come into the jury commission room, you don't leave until either A, you're called to a trial, B, you go to lunch, or C, you leave for the day. Otherwise, you are in this giant cattle pen with all these other people. And you have to scan in every day. Now, for orientation day, the way it works is you take the little barcode that was in your summons. You rip that off your summons, and very easily you take it up to a machine. It looks like a giant all-in-one unit with a very clearly defined barcode reader. You hold up your barcode to the barcode reader. Information pops up on the screen. It is a touch screen. There is no keyboard. There is no mouse. The only way you can interact with this machine is to touch it. It basically says, is this you or not? Let's just say that certain members of the population still struggle with this. Okay.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Check-in still took a little bit longer than it probably should have. And as somebody who messes with technology on a daily basis, and even if you don't mess with technology on a daily basis, there is a real sense of frustration watch somebody struggle this mightily. And it's not even necessarily an accessibility issue. It's just that I think people aren't really sure how this should work. Because I think probably 98% of the people who were there have never been on jury duty before. Now, once you're checked in, then you have to decide if you want your parking to be paid for out of your stipend, because you are paid for jury duty. I was going to be paid $20 a day for jury duty. Now, if you want, you can basically have the jury commission pay for your parking. And the way this works is that you don't bring your parking ticket into jury duty with you. It's you print a voucher ticket in the lobby of the jury commission.
Okay.
But in order for this to work, you need to go to a separate machine, scan your barcode, request a certificate that you then take to another machine and scan and get your voucher. So if people had trouble with the first part of jury duty, they sure as hell had problems with this part.
They had to do two separate scannings, two separate machines. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Lord help you if you lose any of that paper in the process or during the day when you go to leave, because then you're going to basically lose the $5 out of your pay plus have to pay for parking on your own. Okay?
Right.
So that's kind of the logistics of this. So once you get into the jury pool, then orientation started. And orientation basically takes an hour and a half. You have to turn off your cell phones. So she watches everybody turn off your cell phones. There were some people in there that brought their work laptops and everything and made me feel a little bit guilty, but not too much. But everybody shut down their electronic devices. And then, the jury commission lady basically launches into a speech about, why you're here. This is important to democracy and our process and everything. And you know what? She got me.
Yeah.
Everything she said was 100% true. And I'm like, you know what? This is pretty awesome. I am honored to be here. Like, I was fully committed at that point. And then they talked about kind of the process about how this works. So the general process is that when you're seated in this waiting room, they will call a series of names. So a judge needs a jury. So the way this works is the judge calls down or emails down or IMs down or however they do this, probably calls, maybe faxes, I don't know. But they reach out to the jury commission and said, we need to seat a jury. The jury commission, depending on the type of trial it is, whether it's civil or criminal, will basically send a group of people up to the trial room, usually more than is needed to seat a jury. So, for instance, during the orientation, the nice lady tells us Monday and Tuesday are the busiest days, period, full stop, because that's when everything's coming in, and chances are that if you're not seated by Monday or Tuesday, you won't be seated at all. But they will need a lot of people on Monday or Tuesday. So after orientation finishes, which at this point it's about 10 o'clock in the morning, they start calling names. They called a group of 20 people to a room on the third or fourth floor of the courthouse. And the way it was going to work is that once those people go up there, they go through a process where they take an oath and everything, and then they find kind of their deliberation room, and they meet their bailiff, and then they go through the process of voir dire. And what that is that's a process by which the lawyers kind of interview individual jurors and ask questions about, can they be impartial or not. I think I'm saying that correctly. Voir dire, I think.
Yeah.
Voir dire.
It's close. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, it's a jury selection process. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then at that point, they narrow the selection down to 12 jurors and a couple alternates. And anybody who doesn't pick comes back to the jury room. You're not excused at that point. So anyway, so they call the first group of jurors right after orientation. And I'm like, oh boy, here it comes, right? We're gonna wait. And like, as they're calling those first group of names, I'm like, man, I hope I get picked. Man, I hope I get picked, right? It's like getting picked first in like a school sport. Yeah. Like, you want to be picked first, but of course I don't get picked. So then so they call the first group, and then from like 10 to noon, they don't call anybody. So at noon, they dismiss us for lunch, and you get an hour and a half for lunch. They don't provide lunch, but you can basically venture out into either the cafeteria that is connected to the courthouse. There's a tunnel that runs from the courthouse, so you don't have to go in and out of security, over to the federal building, which is kind of in the same plaza where the Common Pleas Court is. Or you can venture out into the many number of great restaurants that are in downtown Columbus at that part of town. I'm a Chipotle fan. There's a Chipotle nearby. That's where I ate lunch on Monday. Came back at 1:30 and basically hung out till about 3 o'clock, and they didn't call anybody else.
Wow.
So at 3 o'clock, they said, hey, they're not going to call anybody else today. We're gonna let everybody go at 3, which the latest they can keep you, I think, is 5. So they let everybody go at 3. So day 2 rolls around. We need to be there at 9. So again, I leave a little extra time to make sure I can get into the parking garage. I get down there. You go through security again. You have to check in again. It's not as intense as the first time you check in, but you have to check in every day to make sure you get credit. Otherwise, you get a fine. So I get there and I check in. So 9 o'clock rolls around. They don't call anybody. 9:30, 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock. Nobody has been called all morning. There's literally 110, 120 people in this jury commission room wondering what the hell is going on, right? Like, nobody's getting called. So at noon, the jury commission people get on the intercom, which there's an intercom that basically runs, the entire, room and quiet room and everything. So she says, hey, everybody, just so you know, it's noon. Nobody's called, we're waiting to hear from some judges still, but no one has asked for any jurors. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to delay lunch till 12:30. And if we don't hear that anybody needs jurors by 12:30, we're going to cut the jury pool in half. So what they said was they were going to look, that if they didn't need anybody, they were going to ask for 55 volunteers. And then everybody else could go. And if they didn't get 55, they would take however many people don't volunteer. And then they would basically randomly draw people to stay the rest of the week.
Okay.
Now, at this point, I was a little conflicted because, listen, I've got work I could be doing, right? Like, there are projects and things that I have going on at work that I could be doing. But on the other hand, right, like, I'm thinking...
You're invested, yeah.
I'm in, right? Like, I'm here. What does it say about me if I don't volunteer, right? Like, that kind of runs through your head. But I'm looking around and not a lot of people are standing up. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to leave this to good old RNG, right? Like there were a few people that got up, that wanted to volunteer, but by and large, not a lot of people stood up and walked over to the window. So I was curious. So about 15 minutes goes by. The lady gets back on the loudspeaker and said they had 38 volunteers. So they needed 17 more. So they called everybody back to the main room and said, okay, here we go. We're going to draw 17 names from what I assume is an Excel sheet. I don't know. But they drew 17 names. It became very quickly apparent that they were doing it in alphabetical order. They got through the Fs. I felt a sigh of relief, but I also felt a little disappointed, right? Because I look back on it now, and here it is Friday. That was Tuesday. I probably could have sat there another 2 days. But to be honest with you, I didn't want to bring my laptop down there and do work,
right?
Because I didn't want to lug it back and forth to and from my car every day. I didn't want to sit there and try to do work. I did bring a couple books to read. I read the entire Handmaid's Tale the first day. I started on a second book. I probably could have sat there and read a book for another day or two, but it just didn't seem like the chances were going to be good that they were going to seek that many more people. And yeah, I just got out of it, right? Like there's a lot of people who hem and haw about having to do jury duty, and I kind of wanted to do it, and I didn't get to do it.
Yeah, like me personally, I don't live in Franklin County. I live south of Columbus in Commercial Point, the Pickaway County. That's what I wanted. And I got summoned once, and they basically like, hey, every day, call this number, and we'll let you know if we need you. And the first morning, I wake up, and I call the number, and they're like, yeah, not only do we not need you, don't bother calling the rest of the week. We won't need you any other day. So I didn't have to even leave my house. I just was like, nope, no jury duty for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and, Delaware County is very similar, right? Where you basically call in every day to see if they need you. But not Franklin County. You have to go in.
Yeah, so are you a little disappointed you didn't get on a trial?
I am. I am disappointed that I didn't... I'm disappointed that I didn't get called and at least get to see the inside of a courtroom, because at lunch the second day, I got back kind of early and I actually explored the courthouse. Credit where credit's due. The Franklin County Common Pleas Courthouse is actually a pretty nice building. I managed to kind of walk around some of the upper floors. They're literally just like giant rooms stacked on top of each other for, where the trials happen, right? Where the justice happens. That should be the theme of that building. Come on down to the courthouse where the justice happens. It's really nice. It's very modern. There's a lot of natural light. The 6th and 7th floors are especially quiet because you can't hear the lobby from up there. Okay. I went up there and just sat in the nice quiet sunlight that came through the glass windows up there. There's a couple comfortable benches. The restrooms are much cleaner up there. It was kind of cool to go down to those places and see those things. It was fun. I kind of wish I would have got seated. So if in the future I'm ever called for jury duty, I will probably maybe be a little bit more invested. But the fact that I'm so new in my job still, I'm only a month in, and there were some things that I was genuinely excited to work on, and I didn't want to drive downtown every day and have to fight that traffic and everything. Like, I think in the long run, I think it was probably kind of a blessing in disguise, but I am a little disappointed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, since we're on the topic of government, right? I have been toying with the idea of getting a P.O. box that has now been accelerated.
Okay. And
I don't remember adding this to the document because this is a pretty recent thing that happened to me. So, Paul, as you know, I have a very unique license plate, don't I?
You certainly do.
Yeah. Now, Paul, where is my license plate from?
As part of one of your projects, the HASP project, you had to get your ham radio license, I believe. Is that
yes, it is.
Yes. So
yes.
as
amateur radio
licenses. Yes. So as part of that, you get a call sign. And when you have a radio call sign, you have the option of getting that on your license plate. It is, no offense, it is probably the nerdiest license plate option you can get in the state of Ohio.
It's pretty much up there, right?
Yes.
And so a couple things here, right? Yes, you have to have a valid You have to have a valid and active amateur radio license that you have to bring with you every time you renew your plates and your registration to say, yes, I am allowed to have this license plate.
Yeah.
Because there are rules, right? You have your license plate has to be so many, characters, right?
Right.
And the only way you can have a 6-digit license plate is with a call sign, right? Otherwise, it has to be more than that. And if you want a call sign, you have to prove that it's your call sign. So yes, I went through all of that process. Now, I'm doubly bid here, right? Because Paul, what does my call sign have in it?
The letters SQL for sequel.
Okay. Now, that's a pretty rare license plate, right? It's an amateur radio plate with a database reference in it. All right. I'm going to tell you a story, Paul.
Okay. I can't wait.
All right. So a few weeks ago, I was at home, and I got a message on a social media platform. And the message was, I don't have it up in front of me right now. I think I deleted it out of fear. It was an email from somebody, and the email went, or the message went a little something like this. I was driving around Dublin, Ohio, and I saw an amateur radio plate with sequel in the name. I thought that was pretty uncommon, so I searched it, and I found your name.
Oh boy.
So because if you have a radio license, your information is in a government database, which is public record. It is very easy to find my name and my home address on the internet. Now, I'm not a nobody, but I'm not a somebody. But that kind of drilled home to me that I should probably not do that.
Yeah, I happen to remember your license plate number because it's so unique, and yeah, that is scary.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I thought there has to be a way to hide this information, and the answer is there isn't. Because this is a license that is granted from the federal government, I have to have that record on file and publicly accessible.
Wow.
In this case, publicly accessible is on the internet. So if I don't want that information present on the internet, I have to change my address. And it has to be an address where I can get mail. So I'm in the process of getting a P.O. box. And if you've never done that, oh boy, that's a good one too.
Well, I had no idea. Like, it's just right out there. Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's something, right? And like, I'm in the process of trying to get a P.O. box right now. Mm-hmm. There's some forms to fill out. There's a fee. But then once I get that, I'll have to get in the habit of checking my P.O. box, which I guess we could probably use for show stuff if the off chance people want to send us things for the show.
Yeah. Then you probably have to go through the whole change of address process and get that updated everywhere.
Yep. So again, I have more bureaucracy in my future. But think about that, right? If you were really somebody who was out to get me, like, you could just show up where I live.
Yeah, and it's even more frightening that somebody saw this license plate, went, and out of, like, broke all the social contracts and was like, I'm going to find out who this person is. And not only Googled you, found your address, and then figured out how to contact you on the internet. Yeah,
yes.
that's unsettling.
Because I haven't looked at it recently, but when this all went down, I did go out and look at the website. I don't think an email was there, right?
No.
So you have to first go.
Yeah.
You have to first go to that website, get the name, and then do a Google search to find out who I am,
right?
And then contact me, right? I mean, I'm flattered, thank you, but like, yeah, I think I may be turning into Gary the Privacy Concern Clown, because like that's even a little uncomfortable for me. And I'm not generally a guy that is like super like into privacy. Like, I have a password manager and I protect my personal info and I own a shredder and I do maybe not the bare minimum, but I do enough to protect my privacy, my personal information. But this is a pretty big one.
Yeah, wow. That's upsetting.
It was very upsetting, right? Because what would have stopped somebody from seeing that and coming to my house and be like, "Hey, man, nice car, nice plate."
Yeah,
let me see your Radio Shack, and oh, by the way, I'll be wearing you when I leave.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. At most, it's like, hey, nice license plate. Then it's like, let's be friends, or like, would you like to come into my murder dungeon?
Right now, here's the thing, right? I in no way am implying that this particular person was out to do me any harm. If anything,
right.
They were just a amateur radio operator who also recognized that my license plate has something to do with databases and had a genuine interest. And let me be clear, is that amateur radio operators, by and large, are a pretty large community of friendly people. If this had not been another licensed operator, which he was, I would have been even more freaked out. But I genuinely think this was all very good intentioned. I was very flattered. I appreciated the kind words. But it definitely highlighted that, man, I really got to get that changed.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my big news. That was my other big piece of bureaucracy news, is that I'm currently going through the process of getting the post office to issue me a PO box. So coming soon to a mailbox near you is a PO box for me.
Wow. Yeah. I never would have imagined that could have happened. Wow.
Yeah. Thank you, government.
Yeah. Turns out.
Yeah. Oh man, I can't believe that we've already done a damn near an hour, 20 minutes of this.
I know. Yeah. Turns out you get me talking about role-playing games, and I go on for a bit.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. Yeah, this is fun. You want to do one more, or you want to cap it here?
It's up to you. I know they had one more you had selected. You got time for one more? If you want to leave it?
I did have one more that I did have selected, but I want to wait and see if it rains.
Okay.
How's that for a teaser?
Foreshadowing. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, foreshadowing.
Yep. We'll move it back. Yeah.
Another thing that I promised that I was hoping to have done before recording time this time was our doing their best BBS. That is not ready. I had it up and running, and then I did a bad, and I deleted everything.
Got it. Okay.
So the doing their best BBS will be back, or I shouldn't say back. It will be up and running at some point in the very near future. So be on the lookout for that.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, we're gonna have classic NetHack. We're gonna have some message boards. We're gonna have all kinds of stuff you're gonna be able to get in there and do.
I'm so excited.
You 40 people are gonna be in on the ground floor of something good.
Yep.
I'm telling you.
Yep.
Oh boy. Okay, Paul. So let's talk logistics here. So Paul, where can people find you on the internet?
I am on Twitter at Paul Baylor. That's BAHLER. And where can people find you, Drew?
I'm on the Twitters at Pittsburgh, PITTFURG. And once again, this has been episode 7 of I'm sure they're doing their best.
Yep. We're on Twitter at Doing Best Pod, on the internet at doingtheirbest.com. We really appreciate the reviews, the topic suggestions. If you like the podcast, tell a friend, tell an enemy. I don't care. Just tell people. Say, hey, listen to these guys talk about whatever. It's good. Yeah, so we appreciate all of our listeners. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and make sure you guys are checking out the webpage at least, because we often put links to show notes, and I didn't realize that there was a picture of me staring at corn dogs a couple episodes ago until I clicked there.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. So
the full show notes are always available on the website. Depending on your podcast player, you may get some of it or all of it, but yeah, if you want to link to all the stuff we talked about, go to the website.
Yep. And with that, I think we'll call this another episode. Yeah. This has been a good one.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
All right, everybody. Take care.